In today's video, I'm going to talk about 5 tips that I hope you'll find interesting going through a job interview for a well-paying job. The first tip is that it's most likely that more people than you think switch jobs because they don't like something about their job. Their manager, their company, and so on and so forth. You can find a ton of reasons for this. What you might not know is how easy it is for an interviewer to spot this from a conversation. And the classic approach here is, to have a more personal conversation where, they get you to open up to really explain the situation. And I've, as I grew in experience with these things, I probably can spot this within the first 5 minutes at most of a conversation with someone who hasn't been interviewing and doesn't know about these things. Now, what can you do about this? My advice would be try to really reflect on the situation, and this might sound a little bit spiritual, but try to find forgiveness in a way. Try to get over it. Try to see the benefits. Try to see things positively, because more often than not, negative people have this problem. So if you're switching jobs because of a negative event, or because you don't like something about your job, be careful, because it's very often that it's obvious you're doing so. It might not come across the right way. You might come across as overly negative most of the time. The second scenario where I would like to talk about briefly here is about the visionaries, and especially for more senior roles. I talk to many people who are coming from super senior roles in lesser known companies, and are applying for one of the big 4, big 5 companies, because this is how it works nowadays. There is this trend that they spot a lot of opportunity there. Now, something you should keep in mind if you're within this scenario is that it's fine to be a visionary. It's actually encouraged to be a visionary, and all these companies say, yes, we want to work people that connect with our values, mission, and principle, and so on and so forth. However, getting stuff done in a corporation requires a hands-on approach most of the time. So execution trumps innovation all the time. So balance the examples that you give to also touch upon your vision, to showcase you as a visionary, but also as a hands-on manager. The next third tip, make sense. People that make sense get jobs. It's as simple as this. And I actually made different polls. I surveyed many successful candidates, and it's more often than not that these people who make sense, that have a good tendency to not only pass interviews but also to get exceptional offers for jobs. I believe it's I know it's easier than it sounds, but it's easier to say it than to do it, but I believe it's pretty clear what I mean by making sense. The other element I wanted to talk about briefly here is having backbone in job interviews. Believe it or not, interviewers do not necessarily like people that are too agreeable. And oftentimes, a very common mistake that the candidates do is to prepare written answers to some questions, and what happens is that the more you read those answers, the more templated they will sound, and this might sound as someone who's too agreeable, who's not interesting, who's boring actually. And interviewers do not like that, because especially during a phone interview, it's just a filter. So whether they like you or not, it's as simple as this. So try to have backbone. Try to show them that yes, you have you have your own opinions about things, and you're not answering a question for the sake of giving a star answer or a perfectly templated answer. try not to show your true self, try to show some personality in this, especially during these phone interviews. And last but not least, people do actually prepare quite a lot for phone interviews. Like, although it's a big gamble, it's most of the time it's a huge gamble, these phone interviews. But I've actually been surprised with how many people I spoke with and for how long they've been preparing for these interviews. Salespeople, can oftentimes make their story more concise, while technical people would probably want to add more meat to their existing stories and build that muscle of actually being able to come up with stories for the questions that they're getting asked during an interview. And this is regardless of the role. I was actually impressed by the seniority of some candidates, and I was blown away by the quality of their answers. And I know for sure they couldn't have done this on the spot. In other words, regardless of your current role or your position, or whether they just invited you and you think it will only be a formality, which is a well-known trick, especially with high-performing companies. They invite you, don't worry, it will just be a formality, and then they basically grill you with impossible questions, and you realize you've done a mistake by not preparing. So, especially for more senior roles, it is essential that you prepare in advance for these experiences, and I did find it as an interesting qualifier for success in job interviews.